Hi everyone, welcome back to another Reddit cheating story. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you love to watch more cheating stories. If you want to know how to get back your ex-girlfriend and boyfriend, click the link below.
Does this make sense? Or am I lying to myself? I cheated twice on my wife and went on a huge mental health journey and just looking for insight about it all. Am I wrong to think everything inside of me was not normal? Or are my circumstances normal and I am just a cheater, monster? Read the experience below. Sorry it's long. Imagine you were born from a drug addict woman who chose drugs over her family, abandoning her previous children. Imagine you were born with a father whom no one knew anything about other than probably also a drug addict, and whom you would never know either. Imagine testing positive for amphetamines at birth. Imagine being adopted as an infant to become the ninth and final child of a family that overflowed with love, but lacked healthy communication. Imagine as you were little there was so much love and care from your siblings, but as you grew they moved further and further away one by one and you didn't realize how sad it made you or how alone you felt. Imagine growing up with a framework in your brain that you are probably predisposed to addiction but your whole life you believe it won't be you, so you never drink alcohol or drugs. Imagine growing up with ADHD, where focusing was strenuous, sometimes your emotions were abnormally overwhelming, and hyperactivity that was often alienating and unwelcome. Imagine you never knew about your ADHD until your late 20s, so you grew up with emotional and behavioral problems that were misunderstood and overlooked by yourself and family. Imagine growing up never learning or knowing how to communicate your emotions to your loved ones. Imagine during your adolescence you find a way to cope, to find stimulation that your brain craves, that becomes an addiction as you venture into adulthood, but you won't discover that nor its impact until much later. Imagine despite the unforeseen mental health issues in your life, you seemingly become someone you are proud of, you feel happy, you are comfortable with yourself, and fortunate to never experience significant emotional trauma in your youth and young adult life. Imagine after high school you explore the world, learn more about yourself, and grow up. Imagine you found someone that makes your heart burst at the seams with love, someone who is drop-dead gorgeous, someone whose smile is your favorite sunshine, someone you never want to let go whenever you hug or touch. Imagine marrying that person, one of the most precious, happiest moments of your existence. Imagine you are in the most amazing era of your life and go on adventures that are stunning, but sometimes arguments and insults hurt way more than they should because of your ADHD brain, but you also gravely lack in communicating your emotions. Imagine you are 24, your elderly mother whose health hasn't been the best, falls and fractures her hip. Imagine you've only been married a few months, working full-time, in college full-time, and despite being the youngest in the family, you take on the blunt responsibility of the aftermath. Imagine dealing with hospital trips, phone calls in the middle of the night, talking with your mom as pain and delirium engulfs her, finding her fallen to the floor sitting in her own feces. Imagine living through immense stress and an emotional trauma, but completely unaware of its occurrence and its impact because of your brain's wiring. Imagine never learning how to healthily, properly communicate your emotions well, and you keep coping how you always have but don't realize you are delving into addiction and losing control. Imagine you don't know how messed up your mental state is, and you cross a line you never should have been anywhere close to, then you get involved with a girl you never should have, betraying your spouse, whom you love profoundly and the most important in your life. Imagine for months you keep seeing this other girl, disoriented by limerence, blindly motivated by addiction, and each time when you try to end it you are manipulated and don't know what to do and beyond scared. Imagine the most amazing person in your life that you love indescribably, is pregnant. Imagine it's one of the greatest moments in your life, and you are excited and terrified in the best way possible, you've always wanted the family with your best friend. Imagine you finally put an end to the affair that never should have began. Imagine you are determined and swear you will be better, you'll be a great husband and parent. Imagine that you never owned up to your disgusting mistake, and believe you escaped and can put it all behind you. Imagine in the middle of the pregnancy your spouse found out, which you should have been the one to bring it up before but you let your fear and anxiety dictate. Imagine how devastating and hurtful that must feel, though still an understatement. Imagine all the tears, the screaming, the threats, the sharp cruel words spoken, that would impact you in ways you wouldn't understand until later. Imagine the tumultuous regret you feel, because you have done actions against everything that you are, feel and believe. Imagine that you are extremely confident in that you will overcome this and be better and never commit this again, and involve your religious beliefs to help you move forward. Imagine your spouse tells you to go to therapy because you are so damaged and disgusting, but you don't think you're that bad and it's just anger talking. Imagine only one of your sibling knows, and you briefly talk about it one time, but never again. Imagine besides that, you never talked to anyone about what happened and how it all happened. Imagine despite your substantial resolve, you still have not learned anything about your mental health issues, nor your addiction, nor how to communicate your emotions. Imagine you feel that you are better, that you are doing better. Imagine you started full-time grad school and working almost full-time, but haven't mentally recovered from dealing with your mom's health matters, and you don't realize it. Imagine it's finals week, your child is born and your family just grew a little more and you are overflowing with inexplicable happiness. Imagine your marriage and relationship is left scarred and damaged, and you constantly fear rejection physically, mentally and emotionally. Imagine that the hurtful things that you were told before frequently have their hands around your heart and mind, and you are afraid to walk into situations where you live through it again. But imagine you don't realize or know that is what you are feeling. Imagine you are going days, weeks, months of grad school, working, trying to be a good spouse, and learning to be a parent. Imagine during that time your parents are taken away, which is less stress but you miss them more than you can understand. Imagine that this family absence just adds to the bizarre unrealized sense of abandonment and loneliness you didn't know was constantly at play. Imagine your dog dies. You've never had a dog before. This is your spouse's dog, but it's a stab to the heart that hurt more than you thought it could. Imagine as time keeps passing, and you get fired from your job, which despite being an opportunity to focus more on family and school, the financial hit is stressful and you feel guilty. Imagine you keep trying to be okay and you're doing a decent job at it, and a month passes and you learn mom has taken another fall, but it's the one that will put her in her grave within a few weeks. Imagine you finally get and take chance to go visit your mom and dad. Imagine you take the voyage with your infant and wife. It's stressful, exhausting and sure as hell not easy, but you have to do this because you love your mom and this could be the last time to see her. Imagine you finally get there, you see your mom. Imagine she's in a state that you have never seen before, nor that you were really prepared to see. Imagine you are so excited and happy to see your mom, but she is so frail, pale, contorted, delirious, and her voice is faint. Imagine there is this hurricane of emotions inside of you, and you don't even know it, but you know how much you love your mom. Imagine a couple of days later you leave, hundreds of miles away back home. Imagine you are grateful for the trip, but you don't see nor comprehend how hurt and scared you are. Imagine 2 days before Christmas your mom dies, the woman who adopted you, who loved you limitlessly and perfectly, and you owe your life to. Imagine it's not a surprise, you saw it coming, so part of you tries to act like it should hurt less, but most of you is screaming, crying, lost, angry, heartbroken, and numb. Imagine the latter part is difficult for you to express, and at the same time you don't even realize it's all that you feel. Imagine what you do know you feel is the immense desire to cling to your spouse, hold them, cry on them, kiss them, and just be engulfed in them. Imagine you were able to say that part. Imagine the response you get as, I understand this is painful for you, but I don't want to be there for you in that way. Imagine you understand that, because they are still hurt from your betrayal. But also imagine this is emotionally catastrophic for you, because you have no idea of the mental health issues at play inside of you, and so you live life forward with the false notion that your spouse doesn't want your emotions or be there for you. Imagine that your reaction feels appropriate, normal, and reasonable to you, not knowing that's not how a typical person would react. Imagine this contributes to the turmoil inside of you that you can't comprehend or are even aware. Imagine because of your poor grasp on your emotions and inability to communicate them, you don't really talk to anyone else about it. Imagine it's just you facing things alone, but you don't even see this gloomy isolation. Imagine you get by. Healing takes time. You were under the impression that whatever emotional mess because of your mom's death is inside of you will eventually get better. Imagine your optimism and patience is dictating over your true emotions and you're blind to the phenomena. Imagine that with all of this going on, what you do is cope, not realizing that you are nourishing an addiction. Imagine that you have this fear inside of you that if you express your more negative or distasteful emotions, it will be thrown in your face and your spouse threatens to leave with your child. But imagine you think that's fine to not express those emotions, you love your family enough to not stress or cause conflict. Imagine that overall you think you feel okay, you're getting through grad school, you're loving your son, you're loving your spouse, you're trying to maintain a healthy home. Imagine in spring something called COVID-19 happens. Imagine that COVID-19 changes the world around you in a ways you didn't expect. Imagine you're discouraged to be outside or go to the store, you have to wear masks, you could get sick if not careful and probably die. That there is increased stress, anxiety, and fear in everyone around you. Imagine the internet and social media presents quarantine as a chance for couples to really be closer and have fun, but that concept just makes you feel more alone and rejected, but you don't even notice. Imagine your grad school becomes entirely online, which appears to suit the circumstances, and you have a distaste for computer work in general. Imagine you are confident that this will be brief and temporary, and you can get through this. Imagine the first couple of weeks you find it tolerable, but after a while it's exhausting and unbearably difficulty, and you are certain this is how everyone else must feel. Imagine sitting or standing while staring at a computer screen for hours at a time was frustrating and provoking. Imagine to handle the extra jitters and discomfort you pay attention less, you read nonsense, you're on your phone, you play a video game, you watch TV, you clean, you cook all while in class, which you believe is normal and others must do it too. Imagine you're starting to slip on grades and you have no idea. Imagine summer arrives, and everything is the same. Imagine you feel you are doing a decent job being a dad, a spouse, and a doctorate student, all while inside your brain and heart it's a thunderstorm and hurricane of thoughts and feelings you barely know exist. Imagine your nephew dies. Imagine this is beyond disorienting and not something you thought could happen. Imagine the cause of death is unknown, making it harder to wrap your head around what is happening. Imagine this nephew was who introduced you to the music you still listen to, who helped you get your first job, who would take you along on random errands, who attended the same grad school program you were in, and who worked in the career you were striving to achieve. Imagine your nephew is suddenly gone, and the guilt of not talking to him nor seeing him enough is overwhelming. Imagine the pain and sorrow you feel for his brother and your sister, your entire family because of this blindside tragedy. Imagine the whiplash, because just about 6 months ago you lost your mom, and how could someone else be taken already? Imagine that this event rips you open slightly, and you get and feel a glimpse into everything that's erratically bursting inside of you, but as far as you're concerned it's just the normal pain of the loss. Imagine you feel very lost, and loneliness tries to drown you, so you have the same desire to want to reach out to your spouse and confide in them, but you've erroneously learned that that is not a good idea. Imagine you've still never learned proper emotional communication and don't really talk to your friends or family about this more than informing them of the incident. Imagine the colossal amount of feelings that are inside of you going completely unmanaged, and even festering. Imagine you tell yourself you will be okay, you are supposed to be okay, you have responsibilities that don't deserve to be derailed for too long because you want to be the best you can for your family and future. Imagine the year goes on. The aftermath of your nephew's death and the sum of everything you've gone through has left you devoid of how to identify that you've lost control of yourself. Imagine school goes on, parenting goes on, being a spouse goes on, and living goes on. Imagine that despite all of the unrealized hideous emotional disaster inside of you, you notice happiness and feel happy. Imagine you see your spouse is remarkably breathtaking inside and out, your child is precious and brilliant, and you are grateful for the family you have. Imagine that while you think you are navigating your life wonderfully, your addiction is at an all-time high and you don't see the severity of it nor the harm it is doing to you. Imagine that for years that in order to find comfort and feel less alone, you've indulged in this behavior in relentless quantities, but right now it's integrated into when you first wake up, shower, drive, sit in class, and go to sleep. Imagine you don't realize how out of control you've become, nor how alone and unwanted you've come to perceive yourself. Imagine you constantly crave and seek to satisfy this need for stimulation, but you haven't the slightest idea that is what is happening. Imagine you've made a couple of new friends, your spouse's cousin and their spouse. Imagine that they are new parents just like you. Imagine you get along with them so well, and genuinely appreciate the socializing, the meals, the games, helping watch our child, and the friendship. Imagine the cousin's spouse you objectively identify as cute, but never saw anything or envisioned more than a friend. Imagine one day you are texting the cousin's spouse about something normal, a friendly conversation, but something playful gets said. Imagine that you don't even remember who said what at first, but it became more. Imagine the normal, appropriate talk starts to dissipate, and it becomes mostly sexting. Imagine that for whatever reason, your brain ignored how wrong it was and ignored the consequences, but you wanted more. Imagine that you couldn't or didn't see the families and hearts that would be crushed by what would happen. Imagine you are so submerged in selfishness and mental instability you are not thinking about or caring about what could happen to your family. Imagine within the time span of a couple of weeks, things were out of control, but you had no sense of having control or not having control. Imagine you are in an affair again, which should not ever have been happening, but you just don't stop because it's fun and you ignore the severity of the predicament. Imagine one night, after your child went to sleep, she said she could stop by. Imagine you say yes, going against everything that is important to you, and ignoring the catastrophes that could ensue. Imagine she shows up and almost immediately things get out of control and then it's all over, she's gone and your brain still refuses to acknowledge the atrocity you've committed and everything that would be shattered. Imagine the next morning you are going about your day and life like everything is normal, you love your child, your spouse, your family and the future you will have. Imagine you are so psychologically convoluted that you feel like nothing is different. everything's the same, that you were okay, and some distorted part of you that you don't see or understand is pleased to have gotten away with it and find pleasure. Imagine within hours into the day you get a text from the cousin saying that he knows, and the friendship and everything is done, and he is going to tell your spouse. Imagine that this moment in time you are frantic, horrified, sick and shattered, because you finally realize and finally feel the proper weight of what you have done, and everything you will lose. Imagine that this ugly horrible feeling you are experiencing is overflowing and all-consuming. Imagine you are going to lose your spouse and child, family and friends, future, and you wholeheartedly believe that this is what you deserve. Imagine you perceive yourself a monster, which is an understatement, and you know that's how your spouse perceives you and everyone else in your life. Imagine the devastation, the trauma, the cataclysmic pain you have caused your spouse again. Imagine it is so much worse, because you were never supposed to be this or do this, let alone a second time, and it is with family. Imagine when you are asked why, and when you ask yourself why, you have absolutely no idea and it is all the more frustrating, hurtful, and painful. Imagine you know without any shred of doubt that you immensely love your spouse, that your future and happiness is with them and the family built together, but your actions show the complete opposite. Imagine there is obviously something wrong with you and you don't even know what it is. Imagine the only thing you do know is that you are a monster. Imagine the consequences are you become separated from your spouse, you have to live away from your child, so they grow up learning that you won't be there for them. Imagine you cry yourself to sleep and awake, and miss your spouse and child more than you can describe or understand. Imagine weeks and months go by, and you've been going to therapy, because you want to understand yourself and how you ended doing what you did twice. Imagine as you try to navigate this bleak era you've gone into overdrive with your addictive behaviors, still completely unaware of its presence or magnitude. Imagine after hours of therapy and tears you learn you developed an addiction, a behavior that you used to cope throughout most of your life, that coincides with an inability to communicate emotions. Imagine you discover you have had ADHD your whole life, and you finally understand why so many things were difficult for you throughout your entire life, but most importantly you learn about emotional dysregulation and rejection sensitivity dysphoria, two symptoms that have gravely disrupted your ability to feel and communicate your emotions, which was an atrocious combination with the poor communication you learned your whole life. Imagine you've finally discovered crucial, pivotal things about your mental health and problems, and you know your changes and you know how to be better. But imagine it's probably too late, or nobody cares, or maybe no one would believe you, even the people most important to you. There is no excuse or circumstances that makes cheating okay. No one should ever betray the one they love the most. Cheating on someone is cruel and traumatizing. But a person should know themselves as best they can and be aware of their mental health to avoid incidents and damage like this. Here are the best comments, advices that I gathered for this wonderful story. All I read from here are excuses. And horrible ones at that. You cheated because you just wanted some pussy and to hurt your wife. I hope she leaves you and you live alone forever. Imagine you're such a self-absorbed asshole you have to write a thesis on what a cheating fuck-up you are. You're lying to yourself. You know what you're doing is going to hurt someone? Don't do it. It's not hard, mate. Get some real professional help. You're allowed to make mistakes but you can't expect those around you to just accept it. One word: accountability. It doesn't matter if you're going through the shittiest shit ever shitted, you don't get to hurt people who don't deserve such betrayal. You should have decided to not marry if you knew that your never-ending list of excuses would cause harm to others. I'm sorry but no one's going to sympathize with what you said in regards to how it led you to cheat on your wife. Get therapy. Alright? Being from a psychology background, knowing the effects of childhood maltreatment and undiagnosed mental disorders due to people, yeah, all of that makes sense. It's hard. It hurts. You don't know or understand. I get it. But the cheating should have never happened. I have ADHD and while impulsivity is an issue for me, I'd never ever hurt someone by cheating. Let alone twice. I'm reading this and it sounds like you also have borderline personality disorder. Which is hard. So hard. That again. It should have never escalated to any of that. When your wife suggested therapy in the first place, you should have gone and the second incident may have never occurred. I'm not saying you're a monster. You're the unfortunate product of early life adversity, undiagnosed mental disorders, and extreme emotional dysregulation and impulsivity, which ultimately destroyed your perfect life and family. It's a sad tale. Depressing even. I feel for you. However, I can have sympathy for your self-destruction without condoning what you did. Yes, it's very likely the damage is done and cannot be undone at this point. You will have to learn to somehow accept it and move on in life, while still being the best father you can be. If I were you, I would continue therapy and find ways to help youth and people in situations like you were to help them not make similar mistakes. Try to make light and do something positive with your experiences. It may help to lighten the weight you're carrying on your shoulders. Thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Stay tuned for more.